Okay, I'm showing 2 o'clock on my phone, so I think it's a good time to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for another edition of Equidox Webinar Wednesdays. It's been a while since we've done just a standard demonstration of how our software works. So this month, we've chosen just to give any existing users a refresher demonstration on how the product works, or if you are a new user, which if you are, welcome. This is going to be just a quick overview about how you can use Equidox to remediate your PDF documents. So as always, you can visit our website at www.equidox.co. So if you have any follow-up questions, or if you'd like to set up maybe a more one-on-one topic-specific demo and talk about documents that might be more relevant to your organization, we would love to chat with you, so please feel free to reach out to us after this webinar. At this time, I'm going to jump into an actual demonstration of how the product works. So here I am in my Equidox application. If you notice, I'm actually operating directly through a browser. The advantage of Equidox being operated through a browser is that you don't have to install or update or maintain software on any given machine, which is really handy to deploy Equidox to a much larger group of users. So we work with a concurrent user licensing model. And what I mean by that is, let's just say your organization were to purchase 20 concurrent licenses of Equidox. That means 20 different users could be logged in simultaneously and working on their documents. So we don't necessarily put a cap on how many people can have access to the tool. It's just about how many are using it at any given time. Being that it's web-based, there's also a lot of nice collaboration features built in. We're able to share documents through the application. So if you needed to work with a subject matter expert on maybe a very technical document, or if you're a new user and you have a very advanced document you'd like to ask for help with, you can do all of that through the application. You can even have multiple people working on the same document simultaneously. So for a situation where you have maybe a very long document or a document with a very tight deadline that you need to get remediated and posted right away, you could have your best remediators kind of sharing that workload, working simultaneously from their own individual computers. They don't have to be in the same room, nothing like that. They can be totally isolated, working on different pages in that document so that you can kind of power through those large volume projects or those projects with tight deadlines very quickly. Now, what we're looking at here is just a list of documents that I've loaded into the tool for just various demos and trainings that I do. So these documents are in my Equidox account, and they're ready to be worked on at any time. To show you how to get documents into Equidox, I would first click over here on the import button. So that's the second tab on the left-hand side. And that will bring me to this import screen where I have two options. I can either upload documents directly from my hard drive, or I can copy and paste URLs. So this is particularly helpful if you've done like a website audit. You might have a spreadsheet or a CSV file that contains a bunch of different URLs for PDFs that are scattered all over your website. So instead of having to go and download those individual PDFs, which could be a full day project in itself, you can actually just copy and paste the URLs into this field, and then Equidox can go and automatically retrieve those documents for you through their URL. In this case, I've got plenty of PDFs on my hard drive, so I'm going to use the upload tab. So if I just open up my folders, I've already selected a few documents, so I'll just drag and drop these 4 documents into this gray area, and then you'll quickly see these green check marks indicating that the documents have been uploaded. Now, once they're uploaded, I get this blue import button that will appear, and pressing this blue import button will kick off an automated process where Equidox will begin to evaluate these files, and what it's looking for during this import are things like existing tag structure. So if the document were previously tagged, whether that be coming from the source file like Microsoft Word or InDesign, when you hit Save As PDF, there are typically some PDF tags that are automatically generated. However, those are not by any means guaranteed to make the document accessible. And that's really what a tool like Equidox is for, to retroactively look at those PDF tags and just clean them up, make sure that they are accurate, and make sure that that document is going to be compatible with assistive technology. So you can't always rely on existing tag structure. Now, the alternative is that maybe those documents weren't previously tagged in any way, And that's fine as well, because what Equidox does during the import is it will automatically detect various elements of that PDF, and it will give you a head start on that remediation process. So Equidox will find all of the text elements, so different paragraphs in the document. It will find images. It will find hyperlinks, fillable form fields, pages that require optical character recognition. Just different elements that make up the PDF document are going to be detected during that import. And really, it's all aimed at making your process as you go through a little bit smoother so that you're not having to do as much manual manipulation of the individual pages. Okay, so now that those 4 documents are imported while I was talking there, if I return to the main document list, let me close out of this closed captioning. I don't know why my internet is slow. There we go. So when I return to the main document list, I will see that I now have these 4 new documents here ready to be worked on at any time. I'm actually going to get started with this document here. It's a pretty straightforward, simple document. And it was actually previously tagged. It's most likely just a Microsoft Word document, which is very common. So it was actually created in Microsoft Word for Office 365. I can see that right here on the document detail page. One thing I like to mention on this document detail page is that you have the ability to change the document title. That's an important part of accessibility. So for example, this document, if you notice, the file name actually took over the document title. So there was no document title provided. You can update this right here in this title field. So you would certainly want to make sure that you're inserting spaces between these words, and then you don't need things like the .pdf suffix. So a nice, clean, and consistent, clear document title is really important because that's typically the first touch point that a user will have when they are navigating your site and looking for a specific document. You can also set language attributes at this point. So if you have any documents that are presented in different languages, the primary one being English, that's the default setting of Equidox. But let's say you have a Spanish version of this document. You would just change the language attribute to Spanish to trigger the screen reader to read from a Spanish library of words. Therefore, it won't be an English screen reader mispronouncing a bunch of Spanish words, which will sound very silly to the native Spanish speaker who is listening to that document through their screen reading device. You can also share this document with other users. So that's important. If you wanted to ask for help on that document, you can share it with other users in your account. So if you need help with anything, you can obviously collaborate and work together as a team. Now I'm going to jump in here into page 1 and take a look at what we have. So we remember that this document was previously tagged coming out of Microsoft Word. And if you notice right away, what I'm looking at are these yellow boxes that are covering up the content on the page. This is all great. We've got all of our different paragraphs recognized for us. That's handy. But one thing I notice if I zoom in a bit is I can see that my heading level 1 is way down here. So for whatever reason, whoever was publishing this document, perhaps they were using heading styles. This got set as the heading level 1 for the document for some reason. Whereas I would think that the heading level 1 should probably be up here at the very top of the page. So these yellow boxes that we're looking at, think of these as a replacement to tags. They really do equate to tags. We call them reading zones, but all of these labeled with the TX in the upper left-hand corner of the zone, those are going to equate to P tags when we export the document. And then the number in the right-hand corner of the zone, that's indicating the reading order of the page. So the default assumption for the reading order is that it's left to right, top to bottom, which will work fairly well for this document because it's pretty much a standard just top to bottom reading order for every one of these pages, so we don't have much to change there. Now, I'm not too satisfied with this heading level 1 being way down here. I could change this and turn this back into like a text zone or maybe a heading level 2 and then set this as my heading level 1. But before I go any further, I want to show you a really important tool within Equidox that kind of helps automate things. If I go to the page tab over here on the left-hand side, we have this tool called the zone detector. Now, the zone detector is handy if you don't like the initial tag structure that you've been given, or if you don't like the way that Equidox detected the structure and the layout of the page initially. So if you don't like the structure, you can use this tool and you can slide this back and forth left and right, and you'll notice how the granularity of these reading zones starts to change. So this is a way of helping to automate the process where if you don't like what you've been given to start, you can kind of change it to find that sweet spot for the page, and then you don't have to make as many manual adjustments to the individual zones. So just taking a quick look here, you can see that I still have all those paragraphs nicely detected. And if I come up here to my preview button, if I look up here, this button in the right-hand corner, it looks like a computer monitor. If I press this at any time, this is another really helpful tool within Equidox. This is an HTML preview of the page that I'm currently working on. So I'm able to see the structure that I've built in this very simple linear HTML view. And this is essentially just a reflection of what a screen reader is going to read out loud if I were to export this document right now. So as I make changes to my PDF page, I will see those changes come to life over here in my HTML preview. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say I bring the zone detector like way down to the left and I get like individual paragraphs for each one of these lines of text. This is obviously far too granular. And when I go to the preview, you're going to see like the change that it's instantly made. Obviously, that's not correct. We don't want each of these lines of text to be read as its own individual paragraph. And at the same time, if I bring the detection slider all the way to the right, this is a big giant paragraph over the entire page. And that is going to render as this very clearly incorrect giant paragraph where I need a much more granular breakdown of these paragraphs. So I'm going to go back to something like I had before, something along these lines in this neighborhood of the zone detector. And that's going to give me nice detection. And from here, it's just a matter of setting a couple of headings. So I'm going to set this element here as my heading level 1. Now it's a text zone by default, but I could change it to a heading through the drop-down menu, or I can use my keyboard shortcuts. So if I just tap 1 on my keyboard, that will set it to an H1. And when I look at the HTML preview, I'll see much larger font to indicate that I have in fact set that as a heading level 1. Now down here, I might elect to set this as a heading level 2. So this is almost like an outline across this page. These are subsections of this much larger heading level 1. But if I wanted to set this as a heading level 2, I can simply tap 2 on my keyboard, and I will see that I have larger font here representing the heading level 2. So the rest of this page is pretty much clean. I don't really need to do anything else to it. So I can then move on to the subsequent pages in the document. So again, this is another heading level 1. So I could just quickly change this to a heading level 2, and the rest of this page looks pretty good. If you notice, there's a link inside of this paragraph, but Equidox detects that link automatically, so I don't have to worry about it. The anchor point is already provided. The zone is already there waiting for me, and all of my text zones have already been detected. So when you get into documents like this, you can move very quickly through them if you know what you're trying to accomplish. It's just a matter of maybe bumping the detection slider, setting a heading level 2, and then here we can use break lines to identify these sort of different addresses and contact information. And that will render slightly differently in the HTML preview, where you'll see it'll be more reflective of how it looks in the PDF. But essentially, it will put a small pause at the end of each one of these lines of text to read it a little bit more smoothly for something like an address. So a document like this, once you get into the flow of using Equidox and you kind of understand what you're trying to accomplish, you can remediate a document like this literally in seconds, 30 seconds to a minute to get through 4 pages. And then from there, I would just save the document, close out of it to return back to the document detail page. And then I would go to my output tab. Now my output tab will allow me to export this document in multiple formats if I'd like, the primary one being PDF. So I can simply press generate PDF, and Equidox will produce a brand new document for me. And it's going to look and feel exactly the same as the original. There's not going to be anything different about this new document, but it's going to have all of that tag structure that I've just built. So the headings and the reading order, the hyperlinks, all of that is going to be automatically tagged by Equidox simply by exporting it. So this is my new document. It's ready to be sent off wherever it needs to go, posted to the website, sent to a client, whatever it needs. This is your new PDF that can be used and replace the old one that might be sitting on the website that was inaccessible. Now, I'm going to jump into a different document now that has a little bit more to it. So there's a document that has, one of the primary challenges of PDF accessibility is something like tables. Tables can be really quite a burden to deal with. So let's just take a look at like this page here, for example. So this page here has some tables on it. And if you've ever done PDF remediation before, you've done it probably with Adobe Acrobat, you know that tables are really one of the hardest elements to tackle. There are so many steps associated with it. Now, this document was, again, previously tagged, and I already have some table structure here, but let's assume that you don't have the table structure already. Maybe you arrive at the table and it looks something like this, very scary when you've got all these text zones for each individual cell. And if you look at the HTML preview, you can see like this is not at all how a table should be read by a screen reader. That's quite a mess. So what I can do to fix this is I can just simply place a single zone over the entire table and then hit T on my keyboard, T for table, or I could use the drop-down menu. And then this blue table editor button will appear. So when I pop open the table editor, I will just be isolating this portion of the page for myself, and you'll see these green grid lines. And this is Equidox's just initial guess at the basic cell structure of the table. It did an okay job, as you can probably tell, but it missed the mark on the columns especially. Now we can improve upon this detection using our table detector. So this is using a combination of computer vision and machine learning. So as I move these detection sliders back and forth, left and right, you'll see how the green grid lines start to change their detection of this table. So moving them around, you can just, again, find like that ideal sweet spot where you get all of your cells organized correctly. So we remember how ugly this was before when it was just going to be reading random bits of data in like a left to right, top to bottom way. Now, when I press the preview button, what we're going to have is a nice clean HTML table. And then this will all be read correctly through a screen reader and allow that user to navigate the table data. So if they find themselves in this particular cell, they know that they are in the administrative assistant row, and they know that they are in the median lowest wage column. So they can navigate freely through this table data and always understand where they are located in terms of the table structure with the rows and the columns. So the beautiful part of Equidox is that all you're doing to tag this table is interact with it here like on the surface level where you place these green grid lines in the correct locations. And then Equidox will show it to you in this nice clean HTML preview. And it does the hard part when you export the document. It will actually convert this HTML structure back into a PDF tag tree. So you don't have to understand the many nuances of tagging a PDF table, where a table like this could easily take you an hour to work through. In Equidox, it takes, I don't know, 10 to 15 seconds. And then you would just save it and close out. And if you notice, all of those individual text zones that were there before, they have all been replaced by this single table zone. Now, tables can be even more complicated than this. I have another document in here that has quite a complex table, which would literally be like this document, would be like a clear your calendar for the day. If you had a document that was like this or full of tables like this, you have multiple column header levels up here. You have spanning that you need to do, and look at all of these data cells. There are so many steps associated with tagging this document correctly in Acrobat. And you think, well, it's just one page. How bad could it be? I'm telling you, it could literally take you many hours to get through a page like this. All we do is hear horror stories of how long it takes to remediate tables in Acrobat. Whenever we're doing product demonstrations or talking to prospects and clients, every single one of them across the board tells us how difficult and how time-consuming table remediation is when you're doing it manually in Acrobat. So with this, I'm just going to hit draw zone over the table, hit T, and open up the table editor. And even though this table has quite literally like hundreds and hundreds of cells in it, again, I'm just using the table detector here, and it's going to do all of that hard work for me by giving me all of these grid lines here, which, if you can tell, it missed one row at the bottom, so I can quickly just hit R for an extra row. And then if I just go to my HTML preview, what I'll see is I've got basic table structure, so I'm pretty close. I just have to clean up the top portion here where I have some spanning to do. So if I go back here, I've got a little bit of a complicated mess up here with the different ways that the row and column headers are spaced out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of this row here by hitting D on my keyboard, D for delete. And then if I just start spanning, all I'm doing is holding Shift and pressing S. And I'm going to hold Shift and press S. And then that's going to accomplish those spans for me. So if you notice, it turns green to indicate that you've spanned. And then from here, I just need to get rid of this row and span straight down for these two cells. Now, once I've done that, when I go back to my preview, I'll see that I've cleaned up that top portion. But the last thing I need to address now is the fact that I have 3 rows of column headers. So the column headers are represented in that bold font, same as the row headers. They are represented with that bold font to indicate that they will be tagged as table headers, whereas the standard font style is indicating table data. So this table has 3 rows of column headers. So I would simply just change that here in my column and row header field. So changing the column header from the default 1 to 3. And then when I return to the preview, you will see that now my top 3 rows all have that bold font style to indicate table headers, whereas the rest is standard font for table data. So that's how quickly you can tag a very complicated table like this. By comparison, if you could do this table in like less than an hour, I would be stunned in Acrobat. In Equidox, it doesn't take much to get it to a perfectly usable, accessible version in less than a minute. Now, another tricky element type that I want to address in how we kind of address it in Equidox are things like lists. So if I open up a document that has some lists in it, so let's take a look here at this list. So this list was, again, previously tagged. So Equidox imports that existing list structure, but you won't always be so lucky. You won't always have existing tag structure. So let's say you were to start with just a text zone. Now, if I were to look at the HTML preview, this list is going to be read sort of just like a strange run-on paragraph if I were to leave it as is. It's not going to have any list structure to indicate that this is a single list with 3 distinct items. So what I'll do is just simply hit L on my keyboard, and then I have a list detector that will appear. And if I bump that slider from left to right, that will instantly detect that there are 3 list items in this list. And then if I refresh my HTML preview, you'll see the change where now I have a real list delineated by 3 individual bullet points to isolate the 3 list items. So this list is now tagged, and you can move on to other elements in the document. Now, of course, I would want to clean up some other things on this page, but we're really just looking at this document to talk about lists. I think you can see that just taking a quick glance here, the detection of Equidox, it really gives you that great starting point where I'm not having to manipulate much on this page, maybe just setting a heading level 1 and tinkering around with the reading order slightly. I'm going to jump to page 2 to show you a nested list. So these nested lists are much more complicated. And this is the type of mess that you can see coming out of Microsoft Word, where it tagged this as a list, but it really made like, I don't know what it was doing, whereas it's dragging that entire list all the way down here. So this is an example of, sure, the document was previously tagged, but not tagged very well. So if we just focus here on the nested list portion, if I just place, again, that single zone over this element, and the nested list is much more complicated in, especially when doing it in Acrobat, because you have lists inside of list items. So it really kind of compounds the complexity and the time that's needed to remediate lists like this. But in Equidox, again, I just put a single zone around it, hit L for list, and then move my detection slider over a bit further. When I move it over and use the different settings, it's going to invoke computer vision and machine learning. So you'll see how it's got the 5 main items detected based on the location of their bullet points. But then the computer vision looks inside of the items and it isolates the fact that there are other lists in there, and it's already drawn these zones for me. So when I go to my HTML preview, what we'll see is I've built nested list tag structure in just a few seconds. Again, by comparison, this is like maybe a 20-minute process in Acrobat, depending on your skill level. But yeah, if you could do it in 20 minutes, I'd be pretty impressed. There's just a lot of steps associated with tagging all of the list labels and the list items and the list bodies, stacking it all together, expanding and collapsing the tag panel. It's very tricky, very time consuming, very slow. Okay, so that's lists. Just to mention a couple of other features, we can instantly reset reading order for a page. So if I were to just use this page, for example, you're able to change the reading order for the entire page using the default top to bottom or 2, 3, or 4 columns, depending on the layout. So Equidox can instantly reorder the page if you don't like the reading order, or if you've made adjustments to the page and inserted new zones that have taken on a new slot within the reading order, you can quickly reset that reading order for the entire page. You can also click on an individual zone and change the order of it. And you can actually use the decimal system. So if you wanted to set this zone, for example, to the first zone read on the page, you might think, well, if I change that to 1, then I have to change 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 and play a game of like musical chairs with all of the zones on the page. But in fact, you can actually just put a period in front of the 4 to make it 0.4, and that will have that element read first, whereas everything else will fall in line behind it. So you have multiple ways of adjusting reading order in Equidox. It's actually really, really helpful. And then also, if I jump to a document that has some images in it, I also want to mention the fact that we do give you a consolidated list of all the images in the document in one location. So this is really handy because you're able to see how many images there are, the nature of the images. Are they decorative, things like logos or watermarks, or are they something technical that's actually adding value to the document? So if you know what the images represent, you can instantly apply your alt text to them from this single list view. Or if you need a subject matter expert, you can send them this URL and say, hey, can you just go to the images tab and insert alt text for the images? They might not be a remediator per se, but they can certainly use the images tab to describe the images, because assuming they were the ones that published or designed the document. You can also do things like artifact images. So if you want to artifact all of the images with just a couple of clicks, you can. I would not recommend that for a document like this, but I see so many documents where it's just a 100-page long report and every page has the same logo in the upper left-hand corner. You don't need to tag the same logo 100 times with the same description. That's very redundant. So you have the ability to artifact images with just a couple of clicks from this list view. And now you can also go into documents and you're able to click on images, and maybe you need to read a paragraph to understand the context of this image, but you can actually apply your alt description right here from this from the document detail view as well. Another quick thing, we have 1 minute left, I noticed, is setting heading templates. So let's say you wanted to set this as your heading level 2. If you hit 2 on your keyboard and say use as template, when I go to subsequent pages, what Equidox will do is it will find all zones that have the same font characteristics, and it will automatically set that as your heading level 2 style for that document. It's really, really helpful for sort of templatized documents that are consistently designed throughout, because you might have 300-400 pages in a document, and if you can set all of your heading level 2s, all of your heading level 3s, if you can do all of that ahead of time, then you don't have to think as much as you're going through page by page. So these are just a couple of the automated features within Equidox. There's so much more to talk about, and I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. For more information about how Equidox Software Company can help you with PDF accessibility, email us at equidoxsales@equidox.co or give us a call at 216-529-3030 or visit our website at www.equidox.co.